We'll call the meeting to order. We'll ask the Secretary to call the attendance.
Mr. Angler?
Here.
I note Mr. Gaslight is not here. He asked for an excused absence for personal reasons. Mr. Guerin?
Here.
Mr. Holmes?
Here.
Dr. Montgomery?
Here.
Sorry.
Wow.
Mr. Montgomery. Dr. Montgomery. You are Dr. J.D., right?
Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Monroe? Here. Dr. Rice?
Here.
Dr. Rosenthal?
Here. Thank you. Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion for the excused absence for Mr. Geiswhite. So moved. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Motion carries. First agenda item is public comment. I'm not aware of any public comments. Are there any requests for public comment? I've not received any. Okay, thanks. So we'll move on. Chair recognizes Mr. Roberts for the Chief Executive's report.
Thank you, folks. Thank you for visiting us in our new offices. We're pretty well settled in, other than we don't have pictures up in the rooms yet. If you haven't been notified, another convenience of being in a state facility is the bathrooms are under renovation. And so if you need to use the facilities, it's one flight down or two up. So you can make a lot of new friends in the stairwells on your way to the restrooms. This is our condition for the next couple of months. This is also going to be the first formal meeting in what has now been designated the Carson Leslie Room. When we moved into this office, I asked the staff to provide nominations to name this room and the smaller room to the left of me here. And we had a lot of clever ideas. I thought mine were good, big and small, but they didn't resonate with most people. But we had an excellent nomination to name this one, or one of them, the Carson Leslie Room, and another one, the James Reagan Room. I think most of you are familiar with who Carson Leslie was, but very briefly, Carson was a young man who was diagnosed with medulloblastoma, a brain tumor, at the age of 14 in 2006. Carson wrote a book, Carry Me, to tell his story of what it's like to be a kid fighting for life and encourage those who come behind him. Unfortunately, he passed in January of 2010. His mother, Annette, has been very active with the Carson Leslie Foundation in promoting issues and legislation related to pediatric cancer. Annette serves as a member of our advisory committee on childhood cancer. James may be less familiar to you folks. He was diagnosed with osteosarcoma, a form of bone cancer, at the age of 13 in 2006. His was one of only about 400 cases of pediatric bone cancer diagnosed nationwide each year, and the survival rate is not good. James and his sister Mecklin established a foundation, Triumph Over Kid Cancers, to research new treatments. James was invited to speak at a CPRIT Oversight Committee meeting in 2012, and he implored us to consider the impact of pediatric cancers. James passed in February of 2014, just a little over a year ago. What we intend to do is put up a little plaque in each one of these rooms with a couple of photos of these two young kids to memorialize what they mean to us. So, with that, my report will be pretty short here. We have some impending personnel acquisitions, if you will. We've got several positions that are currently being interviewed for, and we are about to extend or have extended offers to two positions and are waiting to finalize those. So I'm hoping we're going to have a rush of 4 or 5 new people here shortly. We will be discussing the impending vacancy in the Chief Scientific Officer later on in the meeting. The status of contract approvals, you may remember that back in February you approved us to enter into contracts for the compliance program and for the internal audit program. Those require LBD approval, time because of the legislative session, and it's just been difficult to get those requests in front of the approving officers. So we will keep waiting. With respect to legislation and other capital activities, I was informed early last week that Nominations has decided to waive its need to have Dr. Rice, Mr. Angelo, and Jerry Geistwhite come to the Nominations Committee, which is an indication, one, they've been appointed, two, their appointments being continued by Governor Abbott, and three, they are not controversial appointments. So unless someone moves to sever them from the list, I love that phrase, unless you are severed, you can expect relatively easygoing or completely easygoing with the full Senate nomination. So my congratulations to the three of you. Mr. Chairman, I believe I'll just, no, I did have a couple of others. I'm sorry. The one bill, House Bill 1952 by Representative Springer, that's the one that proposes to end our product development program, has not yet been set for a hearing. Time is getting short for hearings. May the 11th is the last day for committees to report bills to the full House, in the case of the House. So it's getting tight, but one must always watch bills that don't make it through individually to get attached to others as amendments in the last few days of the session. SB 197 by Senator Schwertner has not been set for a hearing. It has been referred to House Public Health. I am advised that there is now a sponsor on the House side, and I anticipate that bill getting set for a hearing either next week or the week after that. That is the one that requires CPRIT to develop plans for self-sufficiency following our sunset year of 2021. House Bill 4062 by Representative Coleman would increase the amount of money from our fund that would go to prevention activities from up to 10% to a not less than 25%. Still has not been set for a hearing, but there is work in the background that may allow that to have a hearing. So that one may be coming forward. House Bill 1282 by Representative Zerwas, which is to develop an HPV plan for the state, was sent to local and consent. I did not look if they passed it out of local and consent yet. But that's one that we expressed an interest in participating in from the early on because of the topic, and it too is a statewide plan. And then finally, with respect to our budget, we are in a unique position for state agencies of really having nothing of significance in the sense that there's anything we can do about it at budget conference. There is a minor difference between the two houses in our contract approval rider that will be resolved between the budget conferees. It's a common difference between a lot of state agencies, and it will just be a decision that's made that will impact all state agencies as a whole as being specific to CPRIT. So we're looking pretty good on our finances and our budget, and it's a very far cry from 2 years ago, and it's a nice place to be. With that, Mr. Chairman, I conclude my comments.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions or comments on the chairman's report, the CEO's report, that is, on the chairman's report? All right. Thank you, Wayne. Then we'll recognize Dr. Pipke then to introduce the Program Integration Committee's grant award recommendations for academic research grant awards.
Good morning. We have two awards that have been approved, sent forward for recommended recommendations from the Scientific Review Council. The first one is a Rising Stars Award. This is mid-career faculty member. And the candidate, Yashun Yu, is an MD PhD person who is currently a tenured associate professor at the University of Michigan, and probably if he stayed there for another year or so would be promoted at the level of being promoted to full professor. He's in the Department of Internal Medicine, and he works on molecular mechanisms of BRCA1 and 2, which is the gene most closely associated with breast cancer and familial forms of breast cancer. Its mechanism of action is unknown, and so his studies are looking at epigenetic modifications and how they affect tumor suppression in breast cancer, both breast cancer and leukemia development. He is the recipient of a number of awards from the American Association of Cancer Research, from the Susan G. Komen Foundation, from the DoD Breast Cancer Program, from the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. I could go on, but his work has been very well received, very highly regarded, and he's going to UT Southwest to develop a translational research program in the Department of Radiation Oncology. So this is a very talented person, and the review committee was extremely impressed with this person. The second candidate is Margarita Santos, who is being recommended as a first-time tenure-track faculty member. She comes from NIH, and she has the distinction of having published a paper in Nature, one of the most prestigious journals, a year or so ago, on how DNA damage is actually protective against leukemia because it forces differentiation of the leukemic cells into mature cells, which then senesce and die. This was very counterintuitive. It was a very surprising finding, and she went on to demonstrate how DNA breaks reduce the leukemia burden in a mouse model that she developed, and this is a very exciting result and potentially has clinical applications in the future. And she is working on her interest is actually in childhood leukemia. So we have the great fortune of having by no urging of ours, recruited someone very talented in the field of childhood leukemia. And she is being recruited to MD Anderson at the Science Park, MD Anderson Science Park campus. Any questions?
Margaret, can you noted under Dr. Santos the expertise in childhood, you said without any urging from us. Was this an RFA that went out before we incorporated our priorities into them?
That's correct. Those RFAs are open continuously, and we are in the process of now implementing some changes in those, and the next time they open, they will have our stated priorities in them as well as some other minor modifications. So we haven't yet, I think the very next round we'll have those in it. The current round closes on the 20th closes today, okay? And so for the next round, those priorities should be in there. In the round that closed today, just for your information, I think at last count we had about 9. We had 9 candidates that will be reviewed by the SRC, which will come probably will come to the May meeting actually. So that's it.
Thank you.
Anything else?
Do either one of these applicants have minority background?
No.
Just wondered.
Assuming that Asian is not a minority
in
academia.
Santos, Margarita Santos.
She may be.
No, I don't believe she's Hispanic.
Any other questions, comments?
She's European, actually.
So let's recognize Kristen for the interim chief compliance officer to provide certification for the recruitment award slate. This is all in your packet under, of course,
Spanish not
F2.
considered.
Members, I included my memo that discusses. I included a memo in the packet that discusses the compliance process review for the application review process that led to these two recommendations. I've reviewed all of the documentation related to that review process, and I'm satisfied that these two applications, the application review process, was consistent with CPRIT's administrative rules and the state statutes and policies. And so I certify these two recommendations for your consideration.
Thank you. So before we proceed with the motion, we'll note that Ms. Mitchell reports conflict of interest with the University of Texas MD Anderson and University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center, and so in accordance with our rules, she'll be recused from discussion or action on these applications. Are there any other conflict of interest declarations that need to be made at this time? Seeing none, members, you have the list of applications, the grant amounts awarded by the PIC, recommended by the PIC for recruitment grant awards. We'll take these up together. PIC's recommendation will be approved to 2/3 of the Oversight Committee members present and able to vote approve the PIC's recommendations. So we'll take them. We'll entertain a motion now to approve the PIC's recommendations for recruitment grant awards and award amounts.
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Having approval, at least 2/3 of the members, the motion carries. Again, we'll note that Ms. Mitchell has abstained from voting, and now we'll take a motion for the to delegate contract negotiation authority to the Chief Executive Officer and CPRIT staff, and to authorize the Chief CEO to sign on the contracts on behalf of CPRIT. Is there a motion? Second. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kripke. At this time, Chair recognizes Mr. Ross to discuss Agenda Item 6 and again Tab 3.
Yeah, and at this point, Dr. Kripke, as you come back, I'd like to ask all three of the program officers to come up to the table for this discussion, though the discussion has changed considerably in the last 72 hours. Since preparation of the memo and the meeting books for this item, it appears that the likelihood of recommended awards exceeding the available grant funds has dissipated somewhat, actually dissipated. Instead, based on information available now, it appears that after the May 20th meeting, we will have at least $12.8 million in FY 2015 funds for awards at the August 19th board meeting. These, as I understand it, should only be recruitment awards of an undetermined amount, perhaps within the $12.8 million estimate. Has that changed?
We have no idea.
It may be under, it probably is over, but we just don't know. So the serious discussion over prioritization between product development, prevention, and academic research has diminished, but it does serve as a warning that if we didn't have to do it this year, next year or the year after that, the good situation of having more people interested in our money than money available for them is going to occur. It just is. And this is why the program priorities is so important to us, because it will have allowed us to signal to the review councils what the priorities are. That may target what comes to us, but it certainly will help those of us on the PIC to prioritize what we bring forward to you folks. It is always my intention with the PIC to spare you folks having to make that final Solomon's choice, if you will, between different programs. And the tool for us is your priorities that we've heard from you. And at the end of the day, it's still going to end up having a subjective element. It's going to be us at the PIC interpreting what your priorities are, and it may end up being that we just can't do it. We could end up having a split vote at the PIC, and these tough decisions would have to go up to y'all. Although a split vote is still a vote. It's a recommendation, but I think you would naturally want to ask us, why is there a split vote here? And so that could affect the disruptive. There are other plans in the work for these different programs, and it was a solution, but not a desirable one. And it also, one of the alternatives included deferring awards, which would have been that, but we could have done it a little bit of deferral here, or we could have deferred them all. In our administrative rules and our statutes, it is ambiguous if we have the authority to defer projects from one meeting to the next. There is very clear language that says that if the PIC or the board does not act upon a recommendation, it's over with. We could read it another way, but it's, I think, kind of stretching it. And one of the recommendations that I'm going to be making is that we go ahead and develop, through administrative rules, which we are authorized to do, a process for deferrals so that the next time this comes up, we have the clear ability to defer projects from one meeting to the next, so that we've got that in our toolkit. I can even envision, though it's stretched, using a deferral earlier in a fiscal year than that, but I think it could happen. But I do think that it's best for us to establish rules and a process to do deferrals and make it clear so that everyone knows in advance that this can happen. So I've instructed Kristen to prepare rules to that effect to be taken up at May or perhaps at the August meeting. In addition to that, since we don't know the magnitude of the recruitment awards, I am requesting that we have another special meeting of the board in September because recruitments are time sensitive. That's largely why we're having this meeting today, is we really did not want to risk losing these two recruits today. And it has been impressed upon me the importance of timeliness in getting these folks. And I think that if the best solution to this problem is to have a special meeting in September as opposed to waiting till November. So those are the two items that I have to bring to you in this tab. We can go in at great length and rehash priorities, and I would ask you to keep in mind that the priorities have to be established annually. So this fall, we are going to be renewing that process. It may simply be tweaking or reaffirming the priorities you've already got. But I think that now that we've been through this process with the priorities, we see how the priorities can impact the RFA process, the review process, the awarding process, that we can refine those in a way to give the PIC sufficient guidance to use at the end of next year if and when this stops. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it back to you.
So just for clarity, I just was going to restate a little bit. We have one RFA coming back to us that's going to be a recruitment RFA. And I don't know what on average we spend or how many what dollars we do, but we have $12 million that looks like it'll be available in August. I'm just restating. So the question is, what we're trying to offer up is this idea of a special meeting in September. What if here's a case scenario. What if we had potential to have good recruitment for something that would be $25 million this year? Well, we wouldn't want to necessarily just say no to the 13 that would be exceeding the 12 that's available. So the idea might be that we could manage what comes to the review committee such that they would only present to the PIC the things that would add up to about $12 million, and then what other things would be referred would be delayed until, so it wouldn't surface until the next fiscal year. Maybe everybody understands that, but I just wanted to clarify. That's kind of what's going on in this discussion. It enlivens the larger discussion of, maybe next year at this time, and in April, we might anticipate, having a number of kind of grants coming towards us for a May meeting, and then also for an August meeting. And let's say that, I'm just pretending to make a scenario, maybe you have, only $50 million left, so to speak, of our 300 by that May meeting. You might want to see what's coming in May and what's coming in August, and you'd be deferring some and not making that decision in May, so that in August you could look fully at what the portfolio would be, and then you could make final decisions knowing what the whole picture was, if that makes sense, rather than making decisions and dollar decisions and leaving yourself with fewer choices later on. I just wanted to make sure, is that kind of what we're talking about, Wayne? I want to make sure we're all kind of understanding what this discussion is.
But I'm sure we've got questions.
Yeah, so go ahead, please, Margaret.
And I think that one of the things that would be extremely helpful is if you would give us some guidance about, are the recruitment grants your top priority in funding? One of the choices that we had when it looked like we were going to have a significant shortfall was to turn off the recruitment award, withdraw the RFAs, because it didn't look like there was going to be any money between May and September for whatever came in at that point. Obviously, that's not going to happen. We may not have enough to cover everything, but we certainly will have some dollars available. But it would be helpful to know if that is your highest priority. And the other thing I want to reemphasize is that if that is your highest priority, then deferring consideration of recruitment grants is counterproductive, because they are a very tight timeline for recruiting candidates. Most people need to have many choices about where they can go, and if it's a choice between something that's firm and something that might or might not happen, obviously we are going to lose it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Would you propose to determine the sense of the Oversight Committee?
Well, I mean, let me just respond to that, and then to Craig. But it seems like there's kind of two different discussions. One could be a discussion that, well, first of all, it's a fair question to ask about what's the priority of recruitment, and say we definitely don't want to lose recruitment. That is or it is not, and I think the sentiment probably is that it is a higher priority. It seems like one kind of conversation would be to, work on a deferment process so that something that might come to a May meeting could be pushed and shoved to an August meeting if we wanted to sort of work that. It sort of creates a rule so we can play within the rules, as Kristen said, so that we're not making up the rules as we go along. So one kind of approach would be just to sort of do less and just to work on some deferment rules so we can do end-of-year management. Another one would be to sort of try to, again, recast the whole priority thing, and I don't think we want to do that necessarily. There's something in the middle also, and what we don't know, for instance, is on an average research RFA for research recruitment, how much do we on average, grant? And I don't know if that's 12 million or 64 million or 14 million, and so without some of that, it's hard for us to make much of a decision about how you...
Closer to 16.
16, right.
Well,
anyway,
it's lower than that.
Yeah, you can see the totals. This is actually in the appendix material. If you look at cumulative academic research funding by mechanism,
right,
year by year, you can see in blue what the recruitment awards are totaling, and they've run.
Right.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more like that would be the yearly total. But the question is, like, when we do one in May, how much do we do? Is that result of 2 rounds? And what do you get each time? Is more or less what I was thinking. Is a little more data than what you have here.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because if we had one more to go at, like, that's going to show up in August for recruitment, we right now don't really know if that's probably 12 million or what that is, and that might be a little more data might help us think about how we should.
I mean, at the moment,
manage it.
At the moment, we have 9 pending applications that will not come to the May meeting. They're occurring after the May meeting. So, and that's 1 month's accumulation, and there may be more in May, June, and July.
And that's 9 of
we do not know what that is.
Is that high risk, or is that all 3 of them? Is that which kind of recruitment?
That's recruitment.
All 3?
All 3.
Yeah.
Yes. All 3 of them.
So in this round, for instance, we had an RFA, and we only have 6 million for recruitment, right? That was open to. Is that fair?
Yes. This is a relatively small number. I think the applications were. were there four? Were there four applications in the round we approved today? Five, and some didn't make it.
Didn't make it,
right,
so it comes out with two.
But then the next round was 6 applications, I think, and then the one after that is 9 applications.
So maybe the answer to your question, Pete, is maybe what you want to do is build a deferment tool and let the executive team, manage the process, and then and we would maybe decide whether or not we want to clarify that recruitment is a high priority, and that would, for instance, be consistent with the decision that's being made this year to go ahead and do the recruitment, and then potentially, but if there's more recruitment than there is money in August, you would essentially defer so that at the beginning of the fiscal year in September, you go ahead and pick up that so you wouldn't lose a cycle, so to speak, or something. So, I mean,
I just heard Dr. Kripke asking for some guidance. Does that answer her request for guidance?
Well, the question, I mean, if you want to defer applications, if recruitment applications are your highest priority, you would say fund the recruitment applications, but defer product development applications and research grant applications. Defer those and then see what you have left after you fund the recruitment. So knowing, which types of grants you want to have as high priority, recruitment versus research, then you can ask, well, what types of research grants are you more interested in deferring, core facilities grants and funding high-risk grants? You could get down to that level if you wanted, but if you think that recruitment grants are the highest priority, then we can defer in the other categories and let you, look at the whole picture at the end of the year.
Now, for this year, is it true that we've accounted for everything that's coming to us in May, we believe, so that really that whole commentary would be germane for next year? Is that right? Because this year we don't have, all we have left is coming to us is recruitment grants that we'll see in August.
Right.
We've already accounted for everything that's going to come at us in May.
Correct.
And if the recruitment system, if the recruitments are the same as they were this time, it'll only be $6 million, and we'll have $6 million left over, so it wouldn't even be an issue this year.
Correct.
So anyway,
couple things.
Craig was raised hand 5 minutes ago. Sorry, I didn't.
Well, one of my questions may have already been answered, but in this deferment, are we just talking about deferment of recruitment grants? Or are we talking about deferment of all of our programs?
It would just, I think what we were talking about is the context of deferring it just from one meeting to the next in the same fiscal year, not of anything.
I think it would be deferment of, perhaps like Margaret is saying, it would be deferment of everything but the recruitment grants. That you would defer some other academic research awards at the May meeting in order to make sure that we had room for recruitment awards at the August meeting.
Well, that's what we were considering this time, and of course we haven't drafted the rule, but I would envision, I understand Margaret's point about the non-desirability of deferring recruitments, but I wouldn't want to limit it and exclude the recruitments from being deferred. I want all of our mechanisms within each of the programs to be eligible for a deferral if that is what needs to occur.
And that kind of brings up my next question. Did I miss something, or did we establish that recruitments are our top priority?
No, you didn't miss anything.
Okay.
That's what I've asked Chairman how he would propose to determine the sentiment of the Oversight Committee on that point. Yeah.
Okay. Margaret, another question I had is on the recruitments. What's the percentage that the university puts in versus how much CPRIT puts in?
Matching?
Is it 50-50?
2 to 1, isn't it?
It's 50% matched by the institution. So CPRIT gives you $2 million. The university has to come up with the money.
And is that proportion written in stone, or can that be altered to stretch our dollars out?
It doesn't help.
Statute, I think. Statute.
It doesn't. Yeah. It's first of all, no. I don't think. I do think that's written in stone.
Okay.
And second of all, if we change the matching, it doesn't help us because the university matches within the university. That money doesn't come to CPRIT.
Well, I realize, but a recruit is $4 million, And I forgot what you said. If we each put in 2 now, well, CPRIT puts in 1 and the university puts in 3, then we have more money for more recruits.
We can adjust the amount of money that goes to support recruitment.
Okay.
Yes, and we have done that. We have done that since I've been here. We have actually put specific limits on the recruitment packages and made a maximum of $6 million for the established investigators and maxima for the other categories as well.
And what's the proportion again?
The proportion
CPRIT puts in versus the institution?
2 to 1.
To CPRIT?
CPRIT puts in 2, the universities put in 1.
Yeah. And we can't change that to 50-50?
I think the statute.
I mean, the statute establishes what's the required amount of matching, but in theory, there's nothing that prevents us from requiring more of a match. The statute at least establishes that it must be a match. It must be at least 2 to 1. But that money doesn't come to us. It stays at the university, and so maybe that, as Dr. Crippi was saying, that you look at dedicating, putting a cap on the amount of secret money, which is some things that they have already done.
But again, if we made the proportion 50-50, which the universities would gripe about but wouldn't change anything they do, then that would give us more money for more recruits.
The other thing,
in fact, we would just be reducing the cap on our grants. Instead of getting $2 million for an assistant professor, we would be giving $1 million.
Okay.
The other thing about the matching funds, especially difficult when you move into the universities, is we had a sea change in our matching funds requirements in the last legislative session, and the academic institutions are able to use their federal indirect cost rate as a credit toward the match that's required. So, for example, if you are MD Anderson and you have, I think, a 56% federal indirect cost rate, you've more than made up your 50% match that's required.
So the net with that money would never be seen by the recipient of the award. Is that right? That's an accounting exercise that goes on at the university for the overhead of using the space. Is that fair?
I will say that is the fair explanation for everything now. There may be something in the recruitment, I know, for the first-time tenure track. And Margaret, I'm kind of looking at you to help me with this. On first-time tenure track, I know that we have required in the past that the academic institution commit to funding fully the salary.
They have to fund the full salary
for
5 years.
So that's
okay.
For 4 years. Although they still can use their federal indirect cost rate as
matching. Right.
We have other requirements in our RSA that require them to put up money.
Cynthia?
When we revisit our priorities each year to tweak them, we can look back on what the funding has happened the year before, and we can look back and see if there was anything that was deferred or not deferred. I mean, in this instance, we're not having to face that, but in the future, we would be facing that. So could we, at that time, say, well, we did not defer these recruitment grants, but for the coming year, going forward, we're going to cut back on the number of recruitment grants?
Or the amount.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes. Is there competition for these individual recruits from other institutions around the country?
Yes. Huge.
And so presumably a part of our decision process is how do we stay competitive? How do we help our institutions stay competitive? And so before I would make a decision on how I tinkered with the percentages, I'd want to understand what do we need to do to stay competitive.
That's a difficult question to answer on the face of it, but I can tell you that, we can look at how many candidates that we have made offers to and offered secret funds to have actually accepted, because, I mean, in every case, they don't accept because they accept somebody else's offer. So we can look at the acceptance rate. Historically, it was pretty high. It was about 80%. I don't know what it is for this year. We'll have to look and see whether we're doing better or worse than that. Do you know off the top of your head, Mike? He's calculating.
Essentially, we're being outbid.
Yes. Well,
there are other lifestyle issues, or
there are lots of issues. The most important of which, in recruiting academics, is critical mass of people that you can talk to. And so there's no way that, the only way we can deal with that is to try to build the critical mass in cancer research. And that is, in fact, what we are doing. So we'll get you some more data. But.
And Margaret, I know that you included in your memo on these awards that we just approved, and I included it on the compliance memo, but, in this very round that you just approved, there was one applicant that withdrew their application before even review because they'd gotten another award, and then there was one applicant that was included as the recommendation.
Who withdrew?
Yeah, we had 3 recommendations that withdrew before
to accept another position. Yeah, and they're accepting positions at the top, institutions in the country.
And there are situations now around the country. I know it's happening with Cal Berkeley, where a private donor has given the institution money in order to head off people like us, poaching their people. Not everybody, obviously, has been able to establish a CPRIT or the governor's proposed version of the Emerging Tech Fund, but they are now beginning to try and figure out ways to defend who they've got. And I do think that one of the reasons why we needed to have this meeting today is at least one of these is a highly sought after individual that we don't want to lose our window of opportunity if we haven't already. But the question, Dr. Mulrow, is spot on. Our recruitment's our top priority, and that really came into play in our internal discussions leading up to this meeting. We had some pretty strong arm wrestling over that very issue. And we certainly recognize that recruitments are extremely high priority, but we could not state with any certainty that it is y'all's highest priority.
So I wondered if, and I would love to get the sentiment of the group, but, we went through the process and have our priorities that we've established, which, for this year, as we know, and of course we can change those anytime we want with the vote of the board. So, but it could be that since we're on a track right now, which doesn't require any reprioritization, the recruitment grants are going to come through in August, and it's likely we'll be able to fund them fully. And if we couldn't, we could probably, defer them. So it also is possible that we would just sort of leave that as the kind of the first question we'd ask as we establish priorities for next year. And we might have a much shorter discussion because we've got our baseline priorities. Obviously, we went through months of discussion last year. Maybe we could, have a, part of it. Our next meeting could be, 30-minute, an hour, whatever it would take, discussion on priorities and discuss it then, and then sort of codify our priorities for the 2015-16, year as including recruitment and state it at that time rather than trying to decide how we fit it in today with what we have. Just a thought, but defer to everybody. Margaret.
Yes, if there are pieces of information that would be helpful to you about any of the grant mechanisms, if you would let us know that, then we can, have those available for you at the time you decide to discuss it. I think the urgency for our issue was that we came to a point where it looked like all of the funds would be expended at the May meeting. And the question we had is, should we just pull the recruitment grant and not accept any more applications? And
we didn't like that.
If we didn't know if we know what the priority is, then we can say, yeah, we're going to turn those off because we want to not eat into next year's money for something else. But so that's why I think it's important for us to know what your priorities are going forward.
But just make sure I'm understanding. You're responding to what Dr. Rice said. The timeline that he's suggesting would work fine to give you the guidance you need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fortunately, because the pressure is off. Some of the grants were deferred, some were withdrawn, whatever. So we have a small cushion to carry us from May to August in terms of recruitment grants. There was a period when it didn't look like that would be the case.
Well, I think that sounds like a good plan for the fall, and I just asked the staff to help frame the issue for us in preparation for that discussion.
If you had what you consider to be clear priorities, or would we have lost the ones that allowed us to have the extra money now? In other words, did we lose some because we didn't have a decision made, or there weren't priorities? In other words, you said no.
Okay. Is it possible that we take the $300 million a year and we say X amount is going to be for recruitment, and we just ring fence that amount, and we don't invade that from other sources?
You could do that.
You can certainly.
Because I don't know, maybe there's going to be a given individual that we want to recruit that is absolutely the most highly regarded, best recruit imaginable. But then there's also a product development that is a fabulous product development. And I'd kind of like to see them compete within their own slices of that $300 million annual allocation.
Well, that's the priorities discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, that is part of the priorities discussion. If you want to set aside, say, it would help Tom and me, for one thing, to know.
Yeah, Margaret argues for a budget.
We can manage to a budget, even if it's a recruitment grant. We can manage to a budget, but if we don't know what that is, we're going to spend until it's
That's why I think for the discussion, it'd be great to have data to know on average how many dollars do we give in an RFA round that's for recruitment, or how much do we do for product, and at least maybe
lay that
history
out meeting by meeting.
And so we have this it's annualized in this, but this doesn't show us that we're in this annualized number. There were 3 RFAs, so you got to divide it by 3 or whatever. And it'd be interesting to know the first RFA tends to be 60 years, and the second RFA tends to be 30 for whatever reason. Maybe there's some seasonality. And so anyway, knowing more about that data, I think might help us sort of think about how you could budget, or it would be at least something to be there.
Well, it sounds like the staff has discussed this at some length, and in preparation for the meeting where we're going to discuss it, I think we could benefit from some guidance on how you all have seen the issue internally and the issues that you've raised, and just help prompt our thinking on it. So
we can certainly do that. Again, as I said earlier, this year has been a good learning year on the priorities, and now we can refine that discussion, and I think we can provide you with some specifics on what would help with that refinement. I mean, short of going setting aside lump sums for each of the programs, which can be done. I was telling Dr. Rice earlier this morning that I'm not sure, I could be wrong, but I'm just not sure that we can come up with a foolproof, objective way to carve up the money, to plan it out going into a fiscal year, and avoid having this very subjective element at the end of the year.
Wouldn't all this be, rather than try to debate that right now, I think we'd all be better served if it's teed up for the later meeting with Dr. Rice, and then we can hear that perspective, and then you might hear somebody else would disagree with that. But I would prefer to defer it till we have a chance to read the pros and cons ahead of time and get a sense of rather than somebody join issue with you right now and say, "Well, no, Wayne, I disagree."
I don't recommend having that discussion.
Okay.
So maybe just as a thought,
in fact, we're having it. Right.
Yeah. So maybe the goal could be for May. I'm not sure if that's too quick, but for the May meeting, maybe we could begin to get some data, and then for the next meeting, maybe we could think about having that discussion, and that would be the right time maybe to have. I don't know if you can make a conclusion then, but the beginning of the 16th fiscal year, we'll have some priorities that are based on data and could be, consolidated or codified. And if we can't do it in that meeting, we could do it in November, and then that would be the priorities then.
But data and pros and cons. I mean, you all already struggle with this more than we have, and so even if it's just your bias, here's what Margaret thinks, here's what Wayne thinks, and just help seed our thinking.
I'm sorry.
Other than the 10% that goes to prevention, is there any legislative guidance how the rest is divided up, or is that to our discretion?
It's to our discretion. That was avoided by the insertion of the program priorities requirement.
Okay.
There was strong interest in doing that, but it got headed off.
I was just going to mention that we're all working on ways to report against priorities that recognize that our RFAs are just now going out with those priorities in them. We just released the prevention ones April 16th. For the first time, they'll have the priorities listed. So it'll take us a while to get data around how we're doing against priorities, but of course we have the other metrics that we've had since the beginning that we can look at.
Thank you. So there may be two things that don't require a motion. One is to anticipate that maybe at the May meeting we want to bring calendars so we can think about a September meeting potentially if that becomes necessary. That was one of the items that I was asked to mention. The other is that is there a motion needed if we were to have a deferral process? That would be a management tool. You will want to go ahead and ask Kristen to begin to build a draft of that so that we at least have some work on that as we discuss that in the next one or two meetings. Is that do we need a motion for that, or
I would. Okay, Chris and I talked about. I don't think we need a motion. I just wanted some sense of agreement that if you folks thought that, using deferment as a possibility was a dumb idea, then we wouldn't waste the time. But I would like to have Kristen go ahead and prepare that.
Okay.
Yeah, it greatly increases your flexibility in terms of the end of the year
managing it. Any other thoughts before we move on? Thank you. All right, so we're gonna be on item 7, tab 4. Chair recognizes Ms. Eccles and Ms. Doyle for discussion of item 7, which relates to license plate funds. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm going to discuss agenda item number 7, and it's again behind tab 4 relating to disbursement of accrued funds resulting from license plate sales. There are 2 specialty license plates for which CPRIT receives a portion of the sales, and currently there's approximately $31,000 available to be dispersed by August 31st. And I'm going to go into a little bit of background of how funds have been spent in the past, and then I'll talk about the proposed procedure from staff for dispersing those funds. The 2 license plates, which there are examples in your meeting book packets, one is A Fine Cause, and one is Texans Conquer Cancer. The plates cost $30, and of that amount, $22 goes into a license plate trust fund for CPRIT to disperse. Previously, the funds were dispersed by the Texas Cancer Council. There was a special account for where the funds were held. There was also a specific procedure in place from the administrative code. It involved issuing an RFA, and there was also a special advisory committee to advise the council of applicants to recommend. The administrative code only allowed the funds to be spent on nonprofit organizations that offered support services for cancer patients. This would include things like transportation or childcare. But since the creation of CPRIT, that administrative code portion has been repealed, so there hasn't been any definitive in writing process for CPRIT to use. So now transitioning into how to use the $31,000 that's available now, staff has recommended that the funds be used in a similar way that they were used in the past for support services, which would mean reimbursing prevention grantees specifically. The process that would be in place is
reimburse prevention
grantees because it
for what?
For similar support services such as transportation or survival services, and that honors how the funds were used previously under the administrative code.
The one I like to use is wigs. And there are just some things that go along when you've got cancer that people need help with.
Okay. Second the motion.
As far as process in place, the prevention staff at the beginning of each fiscal year would prepare a list of eligible grantees and services that could be reimbursed from the license plate funds. They would then give that list to the agency grant accountants who would identify eligible expenses of those grantees, and grantees who had eligible expenses to be reimbursed from the license plate funds would then go to the agency accountant who would keep track of how the license plate funds are used and to which grantees. And so the action item for y'all is to recommend or approve the recommended procedure for these plates.
Thank you. So, as I understood it, this will be invisible to a grant recipient, but
yes,
they'll be listing some services which match to the requirements of this fund, and we'll do in the background that matching, and that way we can sweep these 31 into our fund. And anyway, so
at the end of the day, it increases the amount of money we can give to awards by the amount of these. I mean, it's disbursement, it's a method of finance, but it frees up our bond money that can, whatever it is, $31,000 can go to a recruit.
Right.
Has that been a kind of an annually reoccurring amount, the 31?
It's about $15,000 to try and estimate how much is available each year.
And so the 31 is a biennium number, or is that
just accumulated since the last time we swept it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think once we approve, if we approve this, we won't have to address it again, but this will just sort of clean the housework for that. So, and the audit subcommittee had looked at this and supports it. So,
and if each of you get one of these license plates, it will increase the amount of money.
Yes.
I have one.
Thank you. We'll bring the instructions back to the next meeting on how to get it. So we'll look for a motion then to proposed by staff to approve the process supported by staff for dispersing license plates. Is there a motion? So moved. Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. So next we'll move on to a waiver discussion that we need to have. DHHS Interim Commissioner Kurt Cole. The board may remember that we approved a similar waiver back sometime. This is a conflict that because of his position as the commissioner, he's a member of the PIC, but also some of his agency constructs could be receiving grants. So there's an inherent conflict, which is based on his position, and we did the same thing for the previous commissioner. So who's going to explain this? Texas laws require the Oversight Committee approve the waiver.
Oh, wait, you can just
Mr. Roberts, do you want to have any comments on this otherwise?
I'm just going to say that this is identical to the waiver, as you just mentioned, that went to Dr. Lakey. And I don't know if this is the most important thing, but keep in mind that you, the Oversight Committee, may amend, revoke, or revise this waiver, and that this waiver is limited to conflicts of interest specified in this document. And with that, unless you have any questions, thank you. So, and he abstains from any discussion of any grants that would be related to his agency. Any questions or comments? So we'll just take a motion to a motion finding that the exceptional circumstance exists and approve the waiver proposed for DSHS Interim Commissioner Kurt Cole. That'll waive the conflict of interest specified in the Health and Safety Code. And in the event he becomes the permanent commissioner, let's also move that we don't have to do this again. Is there a second?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Actually, will.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, each fiscal year we have to do that.
I'm just being an optimist. recognizes Mr. Roberts and Ms. McConnell to discuss the Chief Scientific Officer position and executive search firm contract.
Well, I think all of you know Dr. Kripke has announced her intentions to retire. She still has an opportunity to rescind that intention. I wish she would, but we'll be discussing that more as the months roll on. But it was the decision of the Oversight Committee to conduct a national search and to find a recruitment firm to do that, and that is the purpose of this. Heidi?
So the staff has a recommendation to award a contract for $125,000 to Spencer Stewart to assist the agency with the national search for a candidate to fill the Chief Scientific Officer position. Spencer Stewart was by far the best qualified of the two proposals that the agency received to conduct this search because they have extensive experience conducting executive searches for life science positions at major institutions. I brought this up in the audit subcommittee meeting, but we did specify specifically that Spencer Stewart is not being engaged as a consultant because we are only asking them to assist us with the search and not provide advice on the candidate that we will be recruiting. This is a point of law because there is a government code that dictates if we are engaging them as a consultant, we also have to get approval from the governor's office in addition to the approval for our contract because of the amount from the LDB. Are there any questions out there?
Does that limit the value of that legal technicality? Does that limit the value of the services they provide to us?
No. The way we wrote the RFP, and this was based on the last time that we also had to conduct a national search for the Chief Scientific Officer position, we had the same provision in that RFP. They still reach out to candidates across the nation that, obviously they have extensive networks and bring forward those candidates or others who may apply. They help us with the vetting of those candidates. And then also once the decision is made on the top candidate in terms of actually securing that individual.
So they just don't make a recommendation.
Correct.
Who supplies the service like background checks and things like that? And is that what they would do if they were a consultant? I mean, do criminal background checks or I don't know what, just other kinds of checks?
They'll do that. Yes, they'll do that.
They do that anyway?
Yeah, that's part of it.
Yes.
Okay.
That's part of their service.
Giving it. I think you should hire that.
Okay. All right.
And have we written the specifications for this job?
Yes, subject to the search firm may want to modify them, but we have written the basic template for it. Actually, we did it, and then with input.
And what's the timeline?
Dr. Kripke expressed to me a desire to retire no later than August 31st. If we could find the right candidate beforehand, she'd like to leave tomorrow. But I think there's a little fuzziness there. I'm certainly working towards no later than August 31st. I think it's only fair to say that since we have to get LBB approval of this contract, we probably won't actually begin it until the session is over, which means roughly June 2nd. And that's gonna push us. And if we don't have a new position in place, we'll have to figure something out.
And is there a preference for someone in Texas as opposed to out of Texas?
No. I would prefer not to have somebody who was recently engaged at one of our grantee institutions, but that's far from being a deal killer. I think there's real advantages to having somebody from out of the state come into it. But
person expected to be here in Austin?
That would be a strong preference.
Have we announced, is there any reason we wouldn't announce, like in Nature magazine and some other kinds of places, the existence of the upcoming
I believe
process?
the search firm would be doing that.
Right, but since we can't engage them and won't have a contract for another 30 or 40 days, any reason why we wouldn't proactively do that?
Oh.
Just because the time is compressed, and we'd have a potential to begin to work immediately.
I think we've discussed that. The issue is that we have to officially post it, and then that means we will start receiving applications. And if it's not coming through the search firm, then we have to process those applications. And so it's
I'm missing that in conjunction. When the search firm comes on June 10th, let's say, why couldn't they pick up the call right then? And what responsibility do we have to do anything with those applications?
Well, we wouldn't, but it just...
I'm just making the point.
Yeah.
Starting July 10th or so, to try to get somebody here by the end of the month, by the end of the summer, is much different than May 1st.
Well, if you recruit someone July 10th and they call up Nature and say, I want to add, that won't appear till September.
Well, that's fair.
Or August. I mean,
so that's my point as well. I mean, maybe we should be putting that ad in now. Maybe it won't appear until June 10th even, because if the search firm can't. Anyway, I'm just thinking about, are there things we can do to accelerate it, like put an ad in Nature? We're not trying to start processing anybody, but to your point, if we wait till after we do a contract, maybe they can't get an ad in Nature until September, and we have no chance of doing that. I mean, Margaret?
I can't just say that I will not walk out and leave everybody high.
Thank you. Well, anyway, so...
Did we get that in a minute?
that means no horse riding.
I was trying to avoid saying that, but I'd like to honor Dr. Kripke's wishes, but I think we've got some flexibility. And I've expressed to her my desire to have her maintain a role with CPRIT in some as yet to be determined capacity, certainly a participant in the November conference. But unless she moves to Spain or France or something like that, I intend for us to keep our hooks in her.
Was there any... Did we canvass the scientific review committee to see if anybody was interested in this position?
Not yet.
I think that the word is going to go out today pretty well. I mean, you had talked to, I think, some people.
I have told the Scientific Review Council, the chairs of all of those committees, that I'm interested, but not the panel members.
Does the hiring decision need to be approved by the Oversight Committee? Or is it?
We discussed this a little bit at the Audit Subcommittee, but I haven't decided on the final steps of this process. But what I envision is these recommendations or these candidates will come forward to us from the search firm. We will then have a search committee made up of maybe me, probably not. But Dr. Kripke, I'm looking at having at least one, if not two, of the members of the Oversight Committee on it. I would really like to have at least one MD from the Oversight Committee on that search firm. I would expect to have one or two others of the chiefs, chief level. Lisa would be on it. I kind of have to do a numbers game here. You get too many people, it could get to be clumsy, but I really want to have scientific expertise. I think Dr. Kripke's participation is going to be invaluable, more so than any of the rest of us.
I mean, I've had some inquiries from when I told the Childhood Advisory Committee, Childhood Cancer Advisory Committee, about this, and the University Advisory Committee, they expressed interest in having some representation.
Duly noted. I mean, that's a great. I hadn't thought of that. But, I mean, I really hadn't thought about the specifics, so I'll stop there. And I'm open to suggestions on how to go about it. It just, I want to get this part of it done first.
Right. I guess speak for the committee or invite other comments, but I would say it'd be lovely to sort of maybe have a description for the next meeting or whatever, just to sort of see how that process would work, just so that we can see kind of what you're thinking. And I'd invite you to think about tactics that would accelerate the process, given that you've got this whole counter signature by the legislative budget board or whoever that makes it where we probably won't be able to actually start the process for another 40 days. You know, and especially as the summertime recruitment, it seems like that's a big amount of time.
There's a list out there that was put out by Reuters. I think it's called the most inspirational minds in the world, and it's divided up among different sciences, physics, neuroscience, cancer, and the cancer doctors on the list that I know several are pretty near retirement and may be interested in getting out of their position as a chief or a chairman. So you may want to look at that list.
What was that called again? The most inspirational scientists?
It's inspirational minds.
Minds.
Well,
I think you were on there.
To get the LBB to move more quickly. I mean, there's just not.
This morning I pressed the envelope as hard as I can press it.
The LBB envelope.
Yeah.
Wayne, you're not delegating authority to the search committee. You're looking to the search committee for input and recommendation.
To me.
Yes.
To me, this will be my choice, but it will be made with all due consideration of this group's recommendation. It is very similar to what we did with the product development officer, except without the search.
Just kidding. Anybody else? Questions, comments on this before we proceed? Okay. So thank you, Ms. McConnell. The audit committee has met this morning. I think we're going to get a report from Angelos on this contract option and the recommendations therein.
Mr. Chairman, the audit subcommittee met this morning to discuss this contract and recommends that the Oversight Committee authorizes the agency to move forward with the signing of the contract with Spencer Stewart to provide the executive search services.
Okay. So, Senate Bill 353 prohibits CPRIT from contracting with any entity that an Oversight Committee or their family member may have a financial interest in. And it's our understanding that we've looked through and questioned, and no one has a conflict of interest with Spencer Stewart. Can we just confirm one more time that no one has any conflicts? General Counsel has informed me that there's no conflicts.
Mr. Chairman, one thing that I would add is that Mr. Geiswhite has been unavailable to review any information or respond back on this. I don't anticipate that he would have any financial interest, but we will. Once he's able to complete the information, we'll make sure, and if for some reason he has something, we'll bring it back to the Oversight Committee.
Okay. So otherwise, hearing none, we'll vote. We'll note for the record that no member reports a financial conflict at this time. So we'd like a motion now to seek approval for a contract with Spencer Stewart to provide executive search firm services not to exceed $125,000. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Thank you. Last agenda item, next to last agenda item, is there any reason that anybody needs to go into closed session to consult with counsel? Next meeting date is May 20th, and we'll have a tentative agenda circulated. I assume that's, I'm not sure what time, but we'll get the time as well. Meeting, 10 o'clock likely. Is there any other business that we should discuss, Craig?
Is there any update on the CPRIT Austin meeting?
The conference?
The conference,
Yeah, we can do that.
I don't want to take a lot of time, but just...
Update on the conference, we've been working on
Believe so.
securing the rest of our vendors for the conference. So we have a meeting planner in place now. We have a vendor in place now that's going to handle our abstract.
I just want on the record it's your
So with our contracting processes, everything is taking a little bit of time. same time, the program areas, the program chiefs have been working on the content and trying to brainstorm and invite some speakers. We have a couple of confirmed speakers already. Dr. George Post from Arizona University, and Margaret and Tom know him well and can speak about his background a bit. And Dr. David Katz from Yale Prevention Research Center to give one of the prevention plenary sessions. And so we're still fleshing out. I can send the Oversight Committee sort of the status of the agenda right now, but we have a lot of other topics and potential people to speak. We don't have, those are the only two we have confirmed right now. But it's moving along well.
I'd appreciate having a look at the agenda, wherever it stands. Yeah.
Margaret, Tom, you want to add anything else about the agenda that we've got on there?
And I've also sent letters of invitation to speak to the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker, Senator Nelson, Representative Keffer, and Congressman McCall, who I'd really like to get all of them. I'm not that sure we won't, but I really would like to get Congressman McCall, considering his involvement in federal cancer tax credits, cancer research tax credits. It'd be very interesting. Plus, he's from this district.
If you're thinking Congressman, you may want to think about Mike Burgess, who's been involved in certain FDA interactions and is a physician.
The bill on HPV is likely to pass, and CPRIT would have a role in creating that strategic plan. We're planning a session on HPV issues and looking at some of the science as well. What are the next generation vaccines, and then what are some of the issues with implementation and uptake, and possibly inviting Zara Wass to either moderate or be a part of that panel.
Other questions, comments? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
All in favor?